Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Took last week off, but it's wonderful to be back, and I feel like we're full steam ahead now until the election, and then probably we'll never take another day off ever again because, you know, civil war impending. Let's talk about this Atlantic article. I feel like I'm a little bit late to the party. I totally checked out this week, but this is like the one thing that I heard this week, this story here, so I don't even know when this really came out. But I think it's important that we're all on the same page here because this is going to be a major issue in the campaign coming up, that Trump is the peace president. Donald Trump is the peace president, and Biden is the guy who voted to send Americans to Iraq. And then continued endless wars while he was vice president. And the left can't have that, right? It's like the left and the Democrats have been positioned as the peace people, right? But that's not true. It's clearly not true with these two choices here. So the left can't have that. So they need to turn Trump into someone who hates our veterans. When logically, you'd think we'd see the person who voted for and oversaw endless wars as the person who actually doesn't respect our veterans. But anyway, that's the root of all this. I'll tell you why I don't believe this Atlantic article. I'll give you an example from yesterday. Okay, this is when I finally checked back into the news cycle and I saw this story yesterday. So I don't have to go way back into the Trump versus the media archives in order to find this. Saw this video yesterday. This is a clip, 12-second clip. I think, so when I first saw it, it had 1.7 million views. When I saw it yesterday, 1.7 million views. Let's just play it here first. That was the clip. And the person said, Trump is lost and disoriented here. His mind goes blank and he doesn't remember what he's supposed to do next. He's deep into his degenerative neurological disease, frontotemporal dementia, mindlessly lumbering and zigzagging in the grass towards a puddle. Okay, 1.7 million views about how the president's not well. Now, maybe like 5 years ago or so, we came up with a sort of some guidelines for digesting the news. Any video you see, two things you gotta ask yourself. First question, any video you see, the first question you gotta ask yourself is it real? Now, we're used to asking that, I hope we are, more with pictures, but now with deep fakes, videos are fake, right? So is that video even real? You have to get used to asking that question. Like that video you saw, did that even really happen? That's the first question you gotta ask. The second question is, what happened right before it and what happened after it? Always go to the longer video. We see it with police shootings. That's a good example, right? With George Floyd, let's say 200 million people saw the initial pictures and video of George Floyd on the ground, right? If 200 million people saw the original video, maybe 2 million, maybe, saw the rest of the footage and saw pictures from the other angle where it's not just one police officer, but 3 police officers on top of them. And no one's gonna show the Minneapolis police manual that says to do exactly what these 3 police officers did, including pictures of officers on top of someone showing exactly what to do, which is exactly what these 3 men did. No one's gonna see that, right? No one's gonna see the full story there. So I went to C-SPAN and found the full video of that moment. Here's the before and the after.
Well, you know, Joe is a pretty incompetent guy. I've watched his interviews. I've watched what he said and how he said it. And I wouldn't have rated him very high in the first place. But Joe Biden has truly lost his fastball. That I can tell you. Thank you. Why should Americans be allowed to buy assault weapons?
Different story, huh? He's not meandering. He's waiting for his wife. Warns her about the puddle. And I even cut out what the reporter asked him. All right, because even if you cut it there, if you just listen to that comment, he's so mean. Why is Trump so mean? Like that comment's so out of left field saying he lost his fastball, right? The question was, Mr. President, Joe Biden says you have more in common with George Wallace than George Washington. George Wallace, the racist governor of Alabama in the 60s who was for segregation, Democrat, of course, right? So he's, Joe Biden says you're a flaming racist, was the question. So you see my point here? You can't, that was yesterday's example, okay? You can't trust anything the media tells you. And by the way, that video, which popped up yesterday as like a viral thing, was from 2018, August 7, 2019. It's from a year ago, right? Can't trust anything the media tells you. So everything, every single, that's a silly example, right? But everything has to go through that filter. Everything you read, everything you see has to go through that filter. Because what other filter could you have? What other filter do you have the filter of adoring trust and loyalty to the media and every single reporter? Is that you just ignore all of their agenda and bias and deep-seated hatred of the man? You just take everything they say at face value? That's your filter? So no filter at all? I guess you could. But I don't know, you must be the kind of person who gives money to Nigerian princes then, I suppose. Even think about this. Who would make a 12-second clip of the president at all? Like who would even have made that original 12-second clip that leaves out all the relevant context from a year ago, right? But people fall for it. Okay, so that's the foundation here. That's how I look at everything. You have to. So the story in question from The Atlantic. I don't have it in front of me. The headline, guys. Americans who died in war, they're losers and suckers. By the way, notice when you have quotes in headlines, two different quotes like that, means there's two different stories. That's not even a hack headline. Okay, so here's the deal. 2018, again, why reporting on this now? And the head of The Atlantic or someone at The Atlantic said they have a lot more reporting to release before the election. A lot more reporting. It's going to be hack stuff like this. So there was a decision made in 2018, they were in France, to not travel to a second American cemetery. And the official story was that the helicopter couldn't fly because of the weather, and the Secret Service didn't want to drive them because it wasn't safe enough. And the Atlantic says neither claim was true. Trump rejected the idea of the visit because he feared his hair would become disheveled in the rain, and because he did not believe it important to honor American war dead. Here's the key. According to 4 people with firsthand knowledge of the discussion that day. That's a weird way to say that. So first, notice in the entire article, there's no sources. No names, no sources, everything's anonymous. But this is from Alex Griswold. He says, is people with firsthand knowledge of the remarks, is that the same as people who heard the remarks? I can think about this. The guy wrote, according to people with firsthand knowledge of the discussion. Is that the same as people who were there? People who were in the discussion? People who heard the remarks? And if it is, why not just say that? Why wouldn't you just say, according to 4 people who heard him say it? Or 4 people who were there, or 4 people who were in the discussion? Why not say that? Why word it this weird, according to people with firsthand knowledge? To me, that sounds like someone with secondhand knowledge of the remarks, right? Like my media BS reader, I feel like after years of this, is pretty finely tuned. That sounds like someone who's trying to use a lot of words to cover for something and to hide something and to obfuscate and to make unclear. Did these 4 people hear the president say this? Or do they just have firsthand knowledge of remarks? So that'd be they have firsthand knowledge of someone else who heard the remarks. That's secondhand. That's a very carefully constructed sentence to make it seem like these 4 people heard him say it. Make sense? It just seems sketchy. Here's another sentence. This is the next sentence. In a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, quote, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." Okay, is that the same 4 people? Is it your same 4 anonymous sources who heard that? Do they have firsthand knowledge of it, or firsthand knowledge of the remark, or like, did they actually see it, right? Is that anecdote just as properly cited as the sentence before, or is that a different thing? It's not clear. There's another line that says, in a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to the lives of the 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Bellewood as suckers for getting killed. Again, same 4 people? Same 4 people, different sources. Why not be specific? Why put them all back to back like that? And they're not even in chronological order. Why not? Why'd you lead with one? What was your thought process in leading with one and then putting the other 2 in that order, right? The whole thing's weird. And here's the tell for me. Trump's understanding of, this is the author speaking. It's a very short article. Trump's understanding of concepts such as patriotism, service, and sacrifice has interested me, the writer, since he expressed contempt for the war record of the late Senator John McCain, who spent more than 5 years as a prisoner in North Vietnam. Quote, "He's not a war hero," Trump said in 2015. "I like people who weren't captured." So this is interesting. Trump's understanding of concepts have interested me since he expressed contempt, right? So to me, that's a reporter, a man who's looking for examples of Trump dismissing our military or whatever, and not a reporter looking for the full story. Anyway, that's what I got. I guess this is the question. Do you not think that someone could just make this up? And it could go either way. It could be like someone just straight making up, or it could be Trump made these offhand comments, and then like a game of telephone, they got misinterpreted and then told to someone else who misinterpreted it and put it through their prism and lens, and then gave it to this reporter, right? Like, so it could be like a little more genuine, or it could be like straight made up. But like, do you think that's not possible? We've highlighted on the show recently 2 articles, 2 Pulitzer Prize winning articles. One was a reporter from the New York Times in the Soviet Union during the Cold War who wrote about, there's no starvation here. Mass starvation. What? Nah, there's no starvation in the Soviet Union here. He won a Pulitzer for that. And then it was like a week or 2 ago, we talked about the New York World reporter who completely made up a story about Woodrow Wilson's stroke. So Woodrow Wilson had a stroke, and no one saw him for like a year. So this reporter went to the White House and wrote this whole long article about how he's got a zip in his step, and he's quick, and he's all there, and he's doing amazing work. And it's actually, he's a better president now after his stroke because he's more focused on the important things. Entirely made up. Absolutely every single part of it was completely made up. Those weren't just articles that happened. They won Pulitzer Prizes. So you think hacks today can't also be hacks? True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So someone the other day tweeted out that California schools are going to implement the 1619 project, and our president tweeted this response. He said the Department of Education is going to be looking into this. If so, they will not be funded. I think the they is California schools. Now, this is the same President Trump who last week signed an executive order that no more critical race theory seminars, these diversity, inclusion, equity seminars, can be taught at any federal agencies. And that's because of Christopher Rufo. Remember months ago, well, we've talked many times with Christopher Rufo, and he's awesome. He's at the Manhattan Institute, I think. And he's been on this mission to uncover and root out all this critical race theory seminar stuff that's being taught in our federal institutions. And it is he did all of this reporting, like true reporting, and the president reacted properly because of it. So congratulations to Christopher Rufo. That is perfection. But on this specifically, the 1619 project, it was about a year ago, and we did a ton of time on this on my radio show. It must have been a little over a year ago because we didn't have the TV show yet. California wanted to implement an ethnic studies curriculum in all of California schools, and it was horrific, and they tabled it for a year. That means that they wanted some more time to find a more sneaky way to implement it, right? So they took out the things that were obviously inflammatory and bizarre, right? Like they changed the word history to herstory, right? Stuff like that, right? So they took all that stuff out there. And they changed it to names that no one can really understand or sound less offensive. Just got an email the other day from someone who's 11th grader is taking an identity and agency class. Identity and agency? What the heck is that? So a non-critical parent will just like blow by that. Like, oh, identity agency, okay, sure. And not really ask questions about what that really is. And that's just like, it's critical race theory, straight up social justice. It's just like the social justice math that we talked about a million times. So the very short of this, just to make sure we're on the same page, ethnic studies, identity and agency, 1619 Project, critical race theory, all this stuff teaches our kids that you are racist, that they're racist, that America's racist at our core, we're racist at our founding, and everything bad today is because America's a racist and horrible place. That's the point. What do you think the fruit of that will be? Do you think the result of that's going to be a generation of people who love this country? Or a generation of people who will do nothing but tear down statues and light buildings on fire and be aggrieved constantly? No one will ever defend what they don't understand. And it was bad enough in the last few decades, when kids graduate high school not knowing who George Washington is. But now it's worse than that. Now they know who he is, but they only know him as a terrible slave owner. And therefore, America's a terrible country. If the communists of China, and I'm not joking when I say this, if the communists of China wrote our curriculum of history class and our school curriculum, they could not do any better than this. James Lindsay, who's obviously the guy who's been following all this perfectly, newdiscourses.com, he shared this picture last week. He wrote, this is critical race theory in a single image. So you see that the themes on the left, and then all white people are racist, and then the classic, PayPal me, give me money. And then you have the woman teaching. So obviously the point here is that all white people are racist, well, actually, no, that's not the point, I should say. When he released that, he was called racist, right? Everyone's like, oh, how dare you, you're fat shaming, and you're racist, and you're blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, okay, fine. So he released video footage of the seminar. So here's this wonderful person.
All white people are racist. So I put this up because I really want any white person in the room to know up front that this is what we're dealing with, that it's not going to be this coddling of white tears and what that looks like. I'm going to discuss, oh, maybe some of us have worked it out. No, you're always going to be racist, actually. So even when you're on your path to trying to figure out how to be a better human being, because I believe that white people are born into not being human, like that actually, instead of people of color and black folks being dehumanized, that actually everyone is dehumanized off rip within white supremacy, that y'all are born into a life to not be human, and that's what y'all are taught to do, to be demons. So in this particular way, white people are all racist. So I just want y'all to know.
It's even worse. I don't know if you could catch some of that stuff at the end. Your brain was like, what? You're born into not being human. You're born into a life to not be human. Y'all are taught to be demons. So this woman's name is Hunter Ashley Shackelford. So I went to her website, right? This is a page from her website. Do you guys have it? Here. Okay. Let me just read this here. This is good. Hunter is a black, fat, cultural producer, multidisciplinary artist, non-binary shapeshifter, we'll get to that in a second, hood feminist, and data futurist. She's the curator and director of a Southern body liberation organization, Free Figure Revolution, which focuses on decolonizing anti-black body violence. Ashley illustrates the relationship between blackness, fatness, desire, queerness, Afro-technology, and popular culture. All right. So I could quote this person all day. Let me just share. This is her pinned tweet, guys. So this is her saying, this is the most important tweet I've ever sent. This is the most important. She said, for me, my gender is always in fugitivity. You cannot capture what you cannot see. You cannot put chains on what shapeshifts. You have zero power and zero ability to misgender me through using the wrong pronouns because my gender is not accessible to you. So that's what her gender is, shapeshifter, okay? These people get paid a lot of money to teach these seminars. And this is an ideology that gets put in your kids' curriculum. I can't express this enough. These people write the curriculum. I don't know, like, do you hear that? Do you not hear that? Do you want your kids to be taught by people like black, fat, cultural producer Ashley the Lion? You think, Slater, you're making this up? You're way over the top here, Slater. All right, San Diego Unified, our school district where I live in San Diego. They had a little training seminar the other day. Do you have the slide up here, guys? So I don't have to read the quote, whatever, but look at the end. It says Sonia Renee Taylor. So I'm like, okay, who's Sonia Renee Taylor? I promise you, I Googled her name. So you don't Google it, 3 videos pop up. So 3 videos pop up. This was the first video. So I didn't go searching for like the craziest thing she's ever said. This is the first one, and it's a CBS News video. So I thought, oh, like this won't be like the craziest because it was on CBS News. So this, right? But let's just get like a little taste into some things that she says. The first video I watched, here it is.
One of the most freeing things that white people can do, or non-POC people, actually any human being on the planet could do right now, is to just say, of course I'm racist. Is to just say, of course I'm racist. If you grew up in a house that spoke French and you, as a baby, just started laying in your crib, listening to people speak French over you, you wouldn't have to do anything to start gaining proficiency in the French language. You would just speak it because that's what's being spoken around you. Our society speaks racism. It has spoken racism since we were born. Of course you are racist. Of course. The idea that somehow this blanket of ideas has fallen on everyone's head except for yours is magical thinking. It's useless. Because what happens when I say, of course I'm racist, is what it does is it says, oh, this is not a personal or a moral failing. This is not because I'm a bad person. This is not because I'm some evil, terrible being. This is because that is the structure of this society that I've been immersed in since the beginning of my life. And what I have the opportunity to do is to learn a new language. The same way someone who grows up speaking French can decide to learn a new language. But that takes work. It takes effort. And that's the difference between non-racist and anti-racist. Anti-racist is about action. That to do nothing is to leave the system firmly in place. It is to absolutely affirm the status quo of certain bodies being allowed resource access opportunities and other bodies being literally killed. So if you want to assure that racism stands, continue being non-racist. But if you would like to see racism dissolve, if you would like to see the interruption of racism, the interruption of white supremacy, then what you'll do is say, where do I speak French? And how do I translate that to a language that is less harmful? I think we all have the opportunity to do that right now.
Okay. So you can drop your kids off at a public school and be taught that, or you can teach your kids this.
Dad, come here.
I was gonna bring.
Yeah. So we've been fighting right now in this time in our country. We're doing this whole Black Lives Matter. Everyone's fighting, everyone's looting. This is my father. I was born in foster care. I didn't have a mother or a father. They gave me away. My father wasn't fit to be my father. This is my dad here, Jacob Benny. He's been there since the beginning. He's done everything. He laid his life down for me, and I lay his life down for him. I don't judge any man on the color of their skin, but the content of their character. We're here, we love. It doesn't matter what color it is. It's all about love. You can't beat hate with hate. You beat hate with love. So everyone out there, please stop fighting. Please come together. We can't beat it that way, with love.
Pick one. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. All that we're going to talk with our professor of virology at Columbia University, coming up next about COVID. And I'm obviously I say this with all the proper disclaimers. COVID would almost be all worth it if we can get full school choice out of this and a school voucher program. And I hope we can do this. Someone who's been on top of this, Corey DeAngelis, he's the director of school choice at Reason Foundation, executive director of the Educational Freedom Institute, and an adjunct scholar at Cato Institute. And follow him on Twitter because he is just covering this every single day. DeAngelis with an I at the end, Corey. Corey, what's going on, brother?
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Man, grateful for you. So give us the quick rundown of what a voucher program could look like.
Yeah, I mean, the main idea is that the money goes to the student instead of the institution. That's the easiest way to kind of think about it, that if the traditional public school doesn't work for you for whatever reason, that money would go into a personal education savings account, which you could then use for private school tuition and fees, but you could also use it for homeschooling expenses, which is really important right now. If people don't want to be in the in-person setting, they could use that money to offset the cost of homeschooling or microschooling, or something people call pandemic pods lately. And look, this is how all these other taxpayer-funded initiatives work, from food stamps to Pell Grants to pre-K programs. The money goes to the person, not the institution. With food stamps, the money goes to the family, and the family can choose Walmart, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods. With the school system, as far as K through 12, it's all backwards, because the money goes to the building regardless of whether it's serving the families adequately. And now it's regardless of whether the schools are even reopening in person. I mean, this wouldn't be such a contentious debate with the school reopening thing if the money went to the people. Because, I mean, just think about it with if your Walmart doesn't reopen, right? You can take your money to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. And so Walmart has a strong incentive to reopen in a safely and a timely manner. And in fact, they've been open the whole time.
Yeah. Wow, such a good point. I love bringing in the grocery store analogy because it's a perfect analogy, right? If you had to go to one grocery store based off of where your house was located, it would be an outrage and the grocery store would be terrible. But you're right about this other point. If the money was if food stamp money was given directly to Walmart, people would be up in arms about a monopoly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and rightly so. In the current system, we allow the individual liberties of that money going to the person, because the money's meant for the family. It's not meant for the institution. A lot of people will try to argue that school choice steals money from the public school, to which I will respond, well, allowing people to shop at Trader Joe's doesn't steal money from Walmart. The money doesn't belong to Walmart. The money doesn't belong to the government school institution. The money's meant for educating the child, not propping up a government monopoly. So that money should follow the child to wherever they're receiving an education, just like we do in all these other services. I mean, in pre-K, a lot of people on the left like pre-K programs, and in those programs, the money goes to the person, and the person can pick a public or private provider of pre-K. Why can't we do the same thing with K through 12 and have the money go to the family?
You're right, and that's such a mindset difference, because there are people who genuinely believe that the money should be used to prop up your friendly neighborhood school, and that's a really difficult mindset to break. Now, do you find that to be a genuine mindset, or is that just the unions wanting their money?
I mean, this is a special interest, right? And I think has a lot to do with power dynamics, because if it was a genuine view that having a strong public school was what they believe to be a good thing, then they would have the same arguments about pre-K programs and Pell Grants and food stamps. But since there's a disconnect here, it tells me that it has a lot to do with these power dynamics, that there's a certain sector or group that benefits a large amount from getting your money regardless of your choice. And so they push really hard against any change.
All right, so like I said, this is like the thing I'm most excited about. I think this would fundamentally transform our country if we had this in dramatic ways I can't even fathom. I'm very, very excited about it, but then I get very discouraged because good things like this never happen. So I've heard President Trump kind of throw some idea, he kind of threw it out there here or there. Obviously, Rand Paul's big on it. What is the likelihood this will happen, or what's this looking like in Congress? We'll start there.
Yeah, there's at least 4 bills in Congress right now, one by Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, and his is called the School Act. It would reallocate essentially all existing federal education dollars from these institutions to individual families if they choose to do so. You could still pick your traditional public school, and the money would still go to your traditional public school if you want. But if that's not working for you, you could take the money elsewhere. But I will say that's only about 8 or 9% of total education spending, which is at the federal level. So there's state level reforms that are pushed as well. But one of the other ones in Congress is the School Choice Now Act, introduced by Senators Tim Scott and Lamar Alexander. And that would be kind of a tax credit scholarship mechanism. It would allow up to $5 billion in federal tax credit. So it's a little different from just taking the existing dollars and reallocating them. It's kind of a privately funded proposal. But then they also have proposals to take some portion of the stimulus funding and tie that to students. So I think in Tim Scott's bill, that would be about 10% of the total stimulus funding.
Okay, so on the Rand Paul bill, you say it's about 8%. We'll call it 10% of per student spending. So if every student's maybe 15 grand, so it'd be everyone getting like $1,500. Right?
Yeah,
something like that ballpark.
That's about right. Because the federal government spends about 60 billion total, but in total we spend about 740 billion on K through 12 education.
So it's really the state. So what states are taking efforts to do this?
Yeah, there's a lot of pushes in individual states to expand school choice. We just saw a win in North Carolina. They expand an already existing private school choice program, the income cap for that, which was about 133% of the free or reduced lunch amount of earnings, and they increased that to 150%. So they raised the income cap in North Carolina. That's a move in the right direction. We see Pennsylvania pushing for something called the Back on Track Education Savings Account. So this would reallocate existing CARES Act dollars that are sitting at the state level in Pennsylvania, and that would go from the institution again to individual families who then could use it for any government-approved educational expenditure. You have places like Rhode Island where you have a senator, a legislator out there pushing for education savings accounts as well. And then also a lot of just other state level bills like this. And in other states, we've already seen some reallocations of dollars, such as Oklahoma. They've taken their existing CARES Act dollars, and I think about 5% of it they allocated to families to use for school vouchers.
Okay, so these, my first take on this seems pretty piecemeally. And when I'm looking for a revolution here, Corey, what are the chances of like a state coming in? I don't even know what state it would be, right? Yeah, you know what I mean? Coming in and just being like, hey, everyone, like, we're totally transforming the whole thing. We're sending out checks to everyone with school-age kids.
Yeah, well, Florida is already a pretty strong school choice state, so that's a state to look towards. They just passed one of the biggest school choice expansions in U.S. history. I think the biggest private school choice expansion just a couple of months ago, I believe. And it was an expansion of their existing programs again. So Florida's leading the way in school choice. Arizona is also leading the way in school choice. So that's another place to look on the horizons to see what they're doing.
Okay, I got like a minute. What's the North Carolina one again? Sorry, if you can go a little slower through that one.
It's the Opportunity Scholarship Program, which is a voucher program in North Carolina. Governor Cooper actually went into office saying that he was going to get rid of it, but the House and the Senate like it. But he has vetoed other school choice legislation before, but this most recent one, it was kind of coupled into the relief bill in North Carolina, and they got into it an expansion on the income limit for the program. So now more people will be able to access it. It was tied to the free or reduced lunch income level of it was 133% of that. They've raised it to 150%. So now more people.
So people have access to what exactly?
Private school vouchers. So if you don't like your traditional public school for whatever reason, you can take about half of what they would have spent in the traditional public school, $4,200 in North Carolina, and you would take it to a private school of your choosing. So people are voluntarily in large numbers using these programs, even though they know that they're only getting about half of what their children would have gotten spent on them in the traditional public schools. And that's because these private schools are doing such a better job at a much lower cost. And look, this is all voluntary. No one has to leave their public school and leave their dollars behind. I would argue more than half should go to the family. They should get almost all of it, 80 or 90%. Sure. But look, these are political moves, and one way to get these things done is to kind of allow some buffer for the traditional public schools.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, we got like 10 seconds. Sorry to do this, but are you hopeful in the direction we're moving?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are re-envisioning how education should be funded, and they're understanding that there's no reason a closed institution should get the money when I'm doing all the work at home with my child. And if my child's going to a private school that's actually opening their doors, I should get some of the money because the money's for educating the child, not propping up a government monopoly. And so people are re-envisioning this, and they're saying, especially because the schools are closed, people are saying, well, why is the money staying with the closed school? That just doesn't make any sense to a lot of people.
I love how you use that word re-envisioning, because that's what we need to do with our education systems, no doubt about it. Re-envision and start from scratch, quite frankly. Corey DeAngelis. Corey, super grateful for you, man. Cato Institute, director at the Educational Freedom Institute, and director of school choice at Reason Foundation. Let's do it again, Corey. Keep it up.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, man. True story. Mike Slater will come back with Professor Rackiniello. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So I was gone last week, and I kind of checked out of the news. So I have no idea what's going on with COVID at all, but super grateful, of course, for our weekly guest, Professor Rackiniello. He's a professor of virology at Columbia University. He's the host of the podcast This Week in Virology, microbe.tv. Professor, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Very well. Thanks for having me back.
So, no, my pleasure. So, listen to some of your podcasts last week, and you talked about rushing the vaccine, or the potential risks of rushing a vaccine. So, what are the safety issues? What are potential safety issues with a rushed vaccine?
So, vaccines are tested in different phases in people. And right now, the most advanced COVID-19 vaccines are in what we call phase 3, which would be the last phase, where you're testing not just whether the vaccine works, and that is it prevents disease, right? It prevents COVID-19. But since we're doing it in a lot of people, 30,000 people typically for a phase 3 study, as opposed to, say, 40 for a phase 1, we're going to know if there are any side effects, right? And any dangerous side effects that wouldn't have appeared in the phase 1 trial, which had very fewer people in it. And to do that, you need to go out a bit longer. You can't just wait a month. You have to wait until people get infected, and maybe the infection causes some weird effect. And let me give you an example. Back in 1976, we rushed a swine flu vaccine out because we thought there was going to be a big epidemic of swine flu, and there wasn't. And the vaccine ended up causing a neurological problem in people called Guillain-Barré, which is basically a paralysis in hundreds of people. And it was a big problem because it wasn't tested enough to be able to pick that up. And so that's what I'm worried about here, is that we decide, okay, let's stop this phase 3 after 2 months. The first one started in July. And so that's not really enough, October, November, to find side effects and whether it works or not. So I just think we have to be careful. And, I know there's a rush to get it out because people are dying and so forth. I totally get that. And I think we have to be ready, but not too soon, because then you will turn people off to vaccines big time, right? If you have a problem with this one.
Yeah, listen, I know nothing about this process, right? But I understand the rush to maybe get to phase 3, but I feel like this is the phase you can't rush.
Yeah. So, a phase 3 is typically 1 to 2 years, all right? So if they started in July, the first one started in July, that would be next summer. And I don't think we have to wait that long, but I do think we should at least wait till the end of the year to make sure, because in the fall, I think we're going to have more and more infections, and certainly in the winter, and that will really test these vaccines. So what side effect could happen? Because my understanding is right, it's not so much the COVID that is causing problems, it's the reaction, it's your immune system response to it. So if you're giving someone a vaccine for COVID, what type of problems could maybe occur? Well, you could have bad reactions to the vaccine itself, right? Already we know that when you give this vaccine to people, if it's injected in the arm, you get soreness, right? Some people get fever. Some people get very tired. Okay, those are acceptable problems, but it could be that in some people it's even worse. Maybe they have debilitating fever. Maybe they have immune reactions to the vaccine that we don't understand. And, that's all the vaccine itself. But then there's the possibility that after you're vaccinated and you actually get infected, that the vaccine does weird things in the presence of the virus, right? So it could make disease worse even. I don't think that's going to happen, but There are cases where previous immunization makes disease worse. So we should just be aware of that and look for it a little bit longer.
I look forward to you helping us guide. I look forward to you guiding us through the data. Right?
My pleasure. No, as it comes out, I would be happy. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I know the media won't do it. And the doctor you have on, he mentioned, is it thalidomide, which was given to pregnant women and that went poorly? So there's
it was a fertility drug given to women who wanted to get pregnant, and then it turned out to cause massive birth defects. These kids were born with all kinds of limb deformities, and they hadn't tested it enough to know that, right? It's really hard to test drugs in pregnant women because you don't want to mess with that at all. So that's just an extreme example of what can go wrong for sure. And that was immediately taken off the market. Yeah.
Yeah. I read an article the other day about is it not affecting men as much? COVID?
Affects men more. Seems to affect men. Yeah.
Okay. Why? Any idea?
Well, we actually talked about this months ago. We had a guest on TWIV whose specialty is to understand why infectious diseases do better or worse in men or women. It could go either way depending on the infectious disease. For COVID-19, overall, men seem to be about 2 times more likely to get serious disease. It's probably hormonally related, right? So higher testosterone in men could be part of the issue. Exactly what it's doing, we don't know, but I think it's a good observation. I think it's quite clear for COVID-19, men are more likely to develop severe disease. It's probably hormonally related. Probably the hormones are somehow interacting with the immune system to make it less effective than women. And what's really interesting is that this seems to be an evolutionarily conserved thing. In other words, in many other species besides humans, this is often the case. Women tend to be better protected. They're the ones who give birth. And so that kind of makes sense, right? That they should be better protected.
Wow, that's something. That's super interesting. We got about 3 or 4 minutes, sir. What else are we missing? What else do you think is important?
So now, of course, schools are reopening, some full, some less so, and we're going to keep an eye on what's going on because, as you know, a few colleges already where they've already been back for a few weeks, they've had small outbreaks, and they had to go in and contain them. And what we've learned is that, again, if you have groups of people without face masks, without physical distancing, that's when you're going to get infections. And so you need to pay attention. Here in the Northeast, we've done a pretty good job at keeping infections low still. And I see a lot of people in New York City wearing face masks. The restaurants are still being cautious. Theaters are not open and so forth. So I want to see going forward if we can maintain this carefulness, I think we could really make an impact at controlling it.
I saw something, I didn't get to see this part of your podcast, but you talked about an absence of evidence for infectious virus in aerosols. What do you know about this?
So it's for weeks now, the WHO, various news outlets have said it's clear that SARS-CoV-2 spreads by aerosol. So by aerosol, what we mean are the smallest droplets that you make by breathing that can travel a long way. So when you breathe and cough and sneeze, you make a whole range of droplet sizes, right? You make some big ones that fall right to the ground, a few intermediate size that go about 6 feet, and then tiny ones that go maybe hundreds of feet even. And so they've been saying that SARS-CoV-2 spreads by these small ones. And the data I've seen do not support that. That's why we say 6 feet, stay 6 feet apart, because we think most of the droplets fall to the ground within that distance. And so I looked at a couple of the papers that supposedly show evidence for aerosol. So aerosol means these tiny droplets. And I just was not convinced by that.
Very good. So that leads me to believe that the mask is, again, more effective because it would stop
it is,
the bigger
I think the mask is very effective. Absolutely. I think, and even if everyone doesn't wear them, everyone should, but, everyone doesn't have to wear them to make a big difference. And so I see more and more, and I think it's great. The more people wear them, the better.
2 weeks ago when we last talked, I just saw, and right before I went on, and this was, I shouldn't have done this. I should have done a little more research, even though you're the expert and I know so little, but it was about the first official reinfection. And You've told us this 100 times. I should have known this, Professor. I failed the test. someone can get, let me see if I can word this right. Someone can get reinfected, but they will have enough antibodies made that they won't get sick. Is that right? And is that what happened with this person?
Well, they have some kind of immunity. I don't know if it's antibodies or something else, but yeah, if you get reinfected, you're not going to get sick. And that's what happened. This gentleman in Hong Kong, he was infected back in March. He got mildly sick, not terribly sick. They got the virus from him at the time. And then he took a trip to Spain. And when he came back to Hong Kong, they tested him and they found he was infected again. But that second time, he wasn't sick. He didn't have any symptoms. And the virus was different. By doing the genome sequence of the virus, they could see it was a different virus. So I'm convinced he was infected twice. And it's a perfect support of what we've been saying, that probably you can get reinfected, but you won't get sick. And since then, there's been another case in the U.S., similar situation, reinfection, different virus, not getting sick. And this is the modus operandus of coronaviruses. They can reinfect you over and over throughout your life, but the second, third, fourth, fifth time, you don't get sick.
And that's wonderful news, obviously.
It is.
Professor, I look forward to going over the data of schools as schools start to reopen, and then the data from the vaccine, the phase 3 trials. When do you think we'll know stuff about schools? Like, when will we be able to look at things relatively conclusively?
I think it's going to take about a month for the data to roll in and to see what's going on. But yeah, we can go over that. That'll be great.
Yeah, and then same thing with vaccines. When are we going to really know about that one?
I think in the next month or two, we're going to start seeing data being put out there, so we can start talking about that. And you know, we'll do that. I'd love to. Yeah.
No, I look forward to that very much. All right, Professor Vincent Racaniello, the website microbe.tv. It is the podcast about COVID and all viral-related things. Microbe.tv, This Week in Virology. Professor, always wonderful to talk to you, sir. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.